So a great many of you may have been expecting a video about Brexit, but the most difficult thing to actually talk about Brexit at the moment is that there's nothing happening. All the news articles, really, when you can sum them up, nothing's happening. We know there's this impasse. We know that there's this decision still to be made. We've heard, especially from the European side, that there has been steps forwards in this, but we've heard from the British side that, oh no, significant problems still exist and that there hasn't been any movement. Who do you believe on this? Well, I'm more inclined to believe the EU on this, because at least they do tend to be more open, especially when it comes to talking about trade deals, not just with us, but with any country that they tend to do trade deals with. So, because of that, the deadline now has been pushed to Sunday. So, if something does happen, I will make a video about it, don't worry. But nothing's happening. And it's just really frustrating that we are going to go through one of the biggest changes this country has ever seen since World War II. And our government is just incapable of seeing the actual economic picture. Because, as we've said before, if you strip out all the rhetoric, all the Brexiteer, Remainer, left-right stuff, and just focus on the pure economics, economically, it does not make sense to sever ties and connections with our biggest trading partners. Remember, in the top 10 of our countries that we trade with, only 2 are not in the EU, and that is the US and China. And to quote people who talk about, oh, there's this Canadian deal. Well, it's not a deal, it's a rollover deal that they can just decide to turn off anytime they want, also meaning that we'll still be having to follow European rules. Again, Brexiteers don't seem to really care about that, but... And then when you look at, again, the facts, we do more trade with Ireland alone than we do with Canada. Canada aren't even in our top 15, from what I remember. It's bizarre. And then the whole Singapore thing as well. Singapore, I don't even think are in our top 20. And again, that's another rollover deal. And again, if we've got to use the Japan deal as our prospects for future trade deals, based on just the Japan deal alone, they're not going to be good. They are not going to be good at all. So, what are we to do then? Well, this really does fall, as I've said, on Labour to really strike and really take some serious advantage. One of the things Labour must do is think and set out the future of what they would look like in power. And that would means that they really can't be, I know it sounds daft, but they can't be conservative about this. They really have to look at some exciting new radical programs that are really going to shift and change this country for the better. For example, we have continuously talked about, if not for the past decade, if not 2, that we are in a housing crisis. And yet the Tories have done nothing but exasperate this housing crisis. So how about Labour introduce some policies to help with that? That could be just one of the many things they could do. But it will take some serious radical thinking to be able to change this. And that's what Keir Starmer needs to do. He can't be cautious. He has to be dynamic, exciting, and in some cases, really willing to take risks. So, before we get into the article that's going to discuss this, please do remember to hit that like and share button. Also down below there's a link to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link, and thank you very much to the people that do support me that way. So, on with the article. Since the stiff early weeks of his Labour leadership, Keir Starmer has loosened up a bit as a public figure. He talks more in a colloquial, less loyally way on his monthly LBC phone-in. Call Keir. He laughs more, sometimes at himself. Last month, he appeared on Desert Island Discs and spoke candidly about his difficult father and his disabled mother, especially compared to Boris Johnson. Starmer has begun to look like a rounded human being, as well as a capable one, the sort of opposition leader that party strategists and many voters would consider prime ministerial material. At the same time, he has tightened his hold over Labour. He likes to say that the party is under new management, a telling phrase from businesses rather than democratic politics. The shadow cabinet and senior Labour bureaucracy have been cleared of potential disruptive figures from the previous leadership. The party whip has also been withdrawn from Jeremy Corbyn for his refusal to stick to Starmer's new line on Labour's anti-Semitism. And constituency parties have been ordered not to discuss Corbyn's treatment, which I think is wrong in a way, because you aren't going to get rid of the energy and, momentum, because that's what, they did bring. They did bring some momentum. They got a lot of people involved in politics that had never been involved in politics or even thought about politics. The biggest growth in Labour leadership in years was under Jeremy Corbyn. The biggest youth influx and more young people are interested in politics because of Jeremy Corbyn. You can't understate he has had a positive impact on the Labour Party, and just to dismiss everything from the Corbyn years would be complete folly. So, anyway, it continues. And some Labour members who have done so have been suspended. There has also been sporadic protests at Starmer's severity, including the passing of motions of no confidence in his leadership by a few constituency parties. But so far, he has not been obviously damaged. Despite only having been an MP for 5 years and a leader for 8 months, he has more power over the party than Corbyn or even Ed Miliband enjoyed as leaders. Even Gordon Brown and Tony Blair had to coexist with other high-profile Labour politicians, who had sometimes very different ideas about what the party should do. But the scale of Labour's defeat last year, the apparent collapse of Corbynism, the party's desperation to get back into power seem to have given Starmer a free hand. Centrist commentators like what he is doing with it. In last week's New Statesman magazine, one of Blair's former speechwriters, Phil Collins, praised Starmer for his strict message of discipline and being prepared to do what it takes to win. He advised Labour's leader to ignore the vapid demand for a vision from critics who say he is yet to lay out the purpose of a Starmer government, or even any policies. After the failed and ever more left-wing experiments of Miliband and Corbyn, the centrist argument goes that Starmer's leadership is a return to political realism. But this is a limited, even counterproductive form of realism. By heavily emphasizing winning power over talking about how to exactly exercise it, about how to change British society and gained prolonged national support from it. A centrist realism serves the party and the country much less well than its advocates might actually imagine. And we've talked about this before, the quote, enlightened centrists. They are really a problem, because very often they don't like left ideas, they don't like right ideas, they just like to essentially keep a status quo. But here's the thing, if a status quo is not working, then it's time to seek new ideas and new ways to do things. So even in these narrow times, it is open to question how promising Starmer's leadership actually really is. His admirers make much of Labour's recovery in the polls under him, from 11 percentage points behind last year's election to about level now with the Conservatives. It sounds impressive, until you realise that every Labour leader since the 1980s, even the hapless Michael Foot, has been about level or ahead of the Tories after their first 8 months. Many British voters habitually make a show of considering new Labour leaders before rejecting them at the first opportunity. When Labour does win, the centrists' express of caution and lack of vision can make Labour governments less significant than they actually should be. Blair and Brown ruled Britain with big majorities for 13 years, longer than Margaret Thatcher. longer than the motley assortment of Tory premiers since 2010. It's hard to argue that New Labour changed Britain as much as these Conservative governments. Many of Blair's and Brown's welcome expansions and the caring part and changing parts of the state were underdone just in a couple of years of Tory austerity. Nor did New Labour's coalition of voters prove very even enduring. The fact that Blair's old seat of Sedgefield and the county of Durham fell to Conservatives last year was in failure of Blairism just as well as Corbynism. The Labour majority there started their shrinking long before Corbyn even became leader. If the party is to recover in the long term, and if any Starmer government is to be more than just another Labour interlude in an essentially Tory era, then what it means for a Labour leader to be realistic, it needs more an ambitious definition. A Starmer government will need to enact reforms and create political loyalties that can outlast it. Clement Attlee's post-war administration managed both. Although it lost power 6 years after, most of the new institutions it established, such as the NHS and most of the expanded Labour vote Attlee had attracted, remained intact throughout the Conservative governments that followed. When Labour revived under Harold Wilson, he had a lot to build on. Starting in 1964, he won 4 of the next 5 elections despite leading a series of flawed governments, and was taken seriously when he claimed that Labour had become the natural party of government. Those days are a long way off now, and worrying about whether Starmer will ever be able to make the same claim feels in very ways very, very premature. When the Conservatives still lead in some polls thanks to minority voters who appear to be willing to tolerate any Tory mistake, and the next election could be 4 years away, thanks to the pandemic, Starmer hasn't even made a leader's speech to a live audience. But he does have a big opportunity. He's become an oppositional leader at a favourable stage in the electoral cycle. Whether the election comes, it is likely that the government will seem tired, in power for too long, and short of fresh ideas and talent. The Tories can conceivably lose not just one election, but several. It happened when they ran out of steam in the 1990s. Could Starmer take advantage and achieve something lasting? When he ran for leader, he produced a highly successful video emphasising his left-wing past. He also made 10 pledges, many of them quite radical, such as no more illegal wars and putting public services back in public hands. The one thing his centrist admirers and the left critics generally agree on is that he made these pledges to win over the left-wing Labour membership. They're not necessarily a guide to what he really believes or would likely do in power. Yet, there is just a chance that Starmer can be persuaded to become more ambitious in his political thinking. He's still a relatively uninformed politician. On Desert Island Discs, he says, "As I've grown up, I've learned the power of saying, I don't know, let's have a look at that." If he ever becomes Prime Minister like Attlee in 1945, Starmer will face a British and global problems that are just too large for the usual Labour caution in government, and he actually might surprise us. So, I'm very hopeful of a Starmer government. I think, again, he has the potential to be a very good leader, but I do agree with what goes on there. Centrism is not really the way to go. At some point, Starmer is going to have to bring in some new ideas, some really fresh, good ideas. And I think looking back into the past might be a good starting point. And as we said at the beginning, abandoning the ideas that many people in Corbynism, such as renationalising our rail system, have really big support. We've just seen an announcement that once again, rail ticket prices are going to rise up again above inflation. This is going to be an absolute disaster economically. Lots of people rely on those public transport links to be able to get to work. Not only that, but we are pricing the lower class out of using the rail network. That should not be tolerated. This could be an amazing rallying cry for Labour to renationalise the rail system. And, but again, that's just one of the things, you know, Starmer could do. Like I say, I'm hopeful, but we'll have to see what happens. We'll have to see what he does. You know, you get more done with hope than you do with negativity. So, but there's also a chance that, as I've said, if you are one of these Corbyn supporters, don't be disheartened. Labour are in a very good position, and we have an opportunity on the left in the Labour Party to start to push forward new ideas that can help Britain sort out this problem. Because one of the things Starmer will probably ultimately do will be have to repairing our relationship with the EU. So if you are or were a Remainer and were disappointed by Corbyn on his stance during the whole Brexit thing, then there is a good chance Starmer can help rebuild that relationship, which can probably definitely help us on the road back into getting into the EU. So there you have it. So, as always, please do remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. And, of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page as well as a one-off donation link. And, of course, please do feel free to join us tomorrow at 8 o'clock for a good morning walk. And I'm sure we'll be discussing yet more inactivity on the Brexit front. But who knows? It could all change by then. As they say, 24 hours can be a long time in politics, as I do this on Friday morning. Who knows what could be the situation by 6 o'clock tonight. So, with that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next time.